My daughter chose her stepdad over me and made it obvious at her wedding when she made a toast to the best dad in the world, but mentioned her stepdad's name. So I also canceled the fully paid $20,000 honeymoon I had planned for them. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to John Winston. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. You never go into a marriage expecting to raise someone else's child. But when I married Dana, I knew her daughter, Riley, was part of the package. She was 7 at the time, freckle-faced, gap-toothed, and cautious. Not mean or cold, just reserved, like a kid who had already learned what disappointment looked like and wasn't looking to collect another dose of it. Her father was still around, sure, but only on holidays and birthdays, whenever it was convenient for him. I never tried to replace him. I never asked her to call me dad. I just showed up. That's what I told myself, over and over again. Just show up. So I did. Soccer games, science fairs, middle of the night stomach bugs. I was there. Not because I had to be, but because, over time, I wanted to be. She felt like mine, even if the paperwork said otherwise. It's funny how those little moments, the ones nobody else sees, are the ones that change everything. I remember the first time she held my hand in public. We were walking through Target, and she was maybe 10. I didn't even notice it at first, just felt this small hand slide into mine while we browsed for school supplies. No words, just connection. Or the time she got sick at school in the 7th grade and called me, not her mom. I left work in the middle of a presentation, still wearing my badge and tie, and drove straight to the nurse's office. She was pale and shivering, embarrassed, but when she saw me, she let out this half sob, half laugh and whispered, "I knew you'd come." Moments like that, those are what fatherhood felt like to me. Not biology, not last names, just being chosen again and again in the quiet ways that mattered. As the years passed, Dana and I had our share of ups and downs, like any marriage, but Riley was the thread that kept things steady. When she got accepted to her first choice college, I was the one who framed the letter. When she needed a new laptop, I was the one who paid for it. Christmas morning, I was the guy crawling under the tree, handing out gifts with her name on them. And it wasn't out of duty. It was love. A deep, stubborn, unconditional kind of love that made me believe, in the deepest part of my soul, that I was her dad in all the ways that mattered. Even when she introduced me to friends as my stepdad, David, there was always something affectionate in her tone. Like it didn't matter that we didn't share blood. We shared years. And that felt bigger, stronger. The real father, Martin, was always a shadow. He'd show up with flashy gifts and promises he never kept. One year, he told her he'd take her to Disneyland, bought the tickets, made the plans, and then vanished the week before. She didn't eat for 2 days. I watched her stare out the window like he might pull up in some rented convertible and save the day. He never did. And I sat beside her that night, quietly hating him and quietly loving her more. That's how it went, year after year. He'd disappoint her. I'd pick up the pieces, and somehow, she'd smile again. And still, I never said a bad word about him. Never told her how many times he bailed, how often he forgot her birthday until Dana reminded him. I figured, why tarnish her idea of her father? Let her have her illusion if it gave her peace. I didn't need credit. I had her trust. Or so I thought. It's a strange thing, investing in someone else's child. There's no roadmap, no guarantees. You do it with your whole heart, but somewhere in the back of your mind, you know that the title of step makes your position conditional, always subject to change. I ignored that voice for years, silenced it with every graduation, every family photo, every dinner where she laughed at my jokes and leaned on my shoulder like I was a fixture in her life. But deep down, I guess I always feared that one day, when the moment came to choose, she might not choose me. I didn't think that day would come in such a public, humiliating way. But maybe that's what makes betrayal sting the most. Not just that it happens, but that you never saw it coming from the person you love the most. The day she got engaged, I remember crying. Not the kind of crying people see in movies. Loud, messy, theatrical. No, it was quieter than that. I was sitting in the garage, nursing a beer, looking at a photo of the three of us at the beach when she was 13. She had braces and sunburned cheeks, and I had my arms slung around her like I was holding the whole world. And in some ways I was. I cried because I knew things were going to change. I just didn't realize how much. I didn't know that the girl I helped raise, the one who called me to celebrate every small victory in her life, would one day stand in a room full of people and make me feel like a stranger. Like I had imagined the whole damn thing. That chapter hadn't happened yet, of course. Back then, all I saw was the excitement in her eyes, the way she lit up talking about floral arrangements and menu tastings. I told Dana I'd handle the honeymoon as a gift, my contribution to the next chapter of Riley's life. I wanted to do it because I believed I was sending off a daughter. My daughter. Not a step anything. Just Riley. Mine, too. And every part of me believed I'd earned that place in her heart. But I was wrong. And the way I found out. It was a toast. Just a toast. A few sentences at a microphone that shattered everything I had built. The thing about weddings is, they don't just reveal who people are. They reveal who they never were to begin with. From the moment Riley announced her engagement to Matt, I told Dana, whatever she needs, I'm in. And I meant it. Every dad dreams of the day their daughter finds someone who sees her the way he does, someone who'll take the baton and run with the same kind of devotion and care. I wanted to believe Matt was that guy. I wanted to believe I was passing her off with pride. So I offered to cover the honeymoon right away. No strings, no expectations. Just a gift. I also paid for parts of the rehearsal dinner, helped upgrade the catering package, and quietly covered the overflow fees when their guest list ballooned past 200. I didn't keep tabs. I just said yes. That was my role, right? To show up. Like always. But something shifted almost immediately. It started small, subtle, really. The wedding planner's emails never included me, only Dana and Riley. When I asked about tastings or venue walkthroughs, Dana would glance away and mumble something like, "Oh, I thought you were busy," or "It was kind of last minute." I chalked it up to oversight. After all, I wasn't the bride. I didn't need to be at every fitting. But then there were the seating arrangements. I noticed during one conversation that Riley referred to a family table for her mom and dad. When I asked where I'd be sitting, she said, "Oh, with some of Mom's friends, I think." Like, near them. It stung, but I smiled and nodded like it was nothing. Like it didn't matter. I kept telling myself this wasn't about me. Still, I couldn't help but feel like a ghost at my own daughter's wedding. Every decision seemed to pull me further into the shadows. The photo slideshow at the bridal shower? Not a single picture of us. Not one of the vacations we took, the birthdays I planned, the graduation I cried through. But Martin? He was all over it, smiling with her on a boat, dancing at a party, hugging her at her 16th birthday, though I remember clearly that he left before the cake. When I pointed it out to Dana, she just sighed and said she wanted to keep things simple. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, staring at my reflection in the microwave door, wondering when I had become so disposable. When had my place in her life turned into something so optional? Martin, of course, was eating it all up. The man hadn't put in more than a few $1,000s, but you'd think he financed the whole thing with the way he strutted around during the rehearsal weekend. He gave a speech at the welcome dinner, unsolicited, mind you, about how proud he was of his little girl and how lucky he was to be her father. People clapped. Cameras flashed. I sipped my whiskey and bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Because what do you say? Actually, I'm the one who paid for the dress you're praising? No, that would have made me look bitter, petty, and I refused to be that guy. So I stayed quiet. I thought that maybe, just maybe, Riley would say something to acknowledge me when it mattered. Dana noticed. I could tell. One night, 2 weeks before the wedding, she found me in the garage again, staring at an invoice for the honeymoon package. "You okay?" she asked, voice soft. I shrugged, just making sure they have everything they need. She walked over, leaned against the wall, and didn't say anything for a while. Then she whispered, "She's nervous. About hurting him." I knew who she meant. "Martin. He's her dad," she added, "but you've been more." I wanted to ask, then why doesn't she say that? But I didn't. Because saying it out loud would make the hurt real. And I wasn't ready for that yet. The rehearsal dinner came and went. I gave a speech, short, heartfelt, practiced a dozen times in the mirror. I thanked Riley for letting me be part of her life. I told Matt he was a lucky man. I kept it classy. And yet, I noticed that when Martin stood up afterward, Riley beamed at him like he was the sun. She reached for his hand, laughed at his stale jokes, wiped a tear when he choked up saying, "You'll always be my little girl." That was the moment I felt it start to fracture. My belief that love, effort, and presence were enough. They weren't. At least not to her. Not when the optics of a perfect father-daughter moment were on the line. I spent the night before the wedding alone in the guest room. Dana and Riley were at the hotel. The house felt hollow. I walked through the living room where her prom pictures still hung, past the kitchen where we used to bake cookies, and into the garage where the honeymoon itinerary still sat, neatly printed and highlighted. 10 nights in Bali. Luxury beachfront resort. Spa credit. Private excursions. All paid in full, weeks ago. It was supposed to be my final gift. My goodbye to the role I had cherished for 15 years. And I had imagined her looking at me, maybe with tears in her eyes, saying, "Thank you for everything." But deep down, I was starting to accept that moment would never come. I showed up to the wedding the next day dressed in a charcoal gray suit with a navy tie, her favorite combination. I smiled, shook hands, posed for photos. I took my seat, not at the front, but near the side, where the wedding coordinator told me to wait. I watched Dana be escorted down the aisle. Then Martin. Then Riley, radiant and glowing, her arm linked with his. My throat tightened. She didn't even glance in my direction, just stared straight ahead, eyes shining with the future. A future I clearly wasn't a part of anymore. I clenched my fists under the table, willing myself not to cry. Not yet. Not here. The ceremony was beautiful. The vows were sweet. Everyone clapped, cheered, threw flower petals. I tried to be happy. I tried to believe this was still a victory. But something inside me had already started to rot. I just didn't know how deep it would go until the reception, until the toast, until everything I thought I meant to her was erased in a single sentence for the sake of a man who barely showed up. Weddings are built on moments. Some are beautiful, like the first kiss or the father-daughter dance. Others sneak up on you, quiet at first, then deafening in their impact. The toast? That was mine. The moment where everything shattered. Up until that point, I'd held it together. Smiled for photos. Laughed at bad jokes. Thanked strangers for coming like I was part of the hosting committee, even though I felt like a guest at someone else's life. I stood off to the side most of the night, near the bar, nursing a bourbon I didn't even want. Just sipping and watching. Watching her twirl in her dress. Watching Martin soak in every second of praise. Watching people walk past me to shake his hand. I told myself it didn't matter. That the night was about her. But when the DJ tapped the mic and Riley stood up, glass in hand, I felt something twist inside me. Hope, maybe. Or desperation. The last flicker of belief that she might remember me. Acknowledge me. The room went quiet as she took the microphone. Her cheeks flushed from champagne and dancing. She looked radiant, I won't lie. Her eyes sparkled. Her smile was wide and sure. She glanced at Matt and giggled before turning back to the crowd. "I just want to say a few words," she began, her voice strong, clear, practiced. "First, to my husband, thank you for being my best friend, my rock, my future. I can't wait to build a life with you." Everyone clapped. I clapped, too, because that part was easy. That part still felt safe. But then she paused, took a breath, and said, "And of course, I have to thank the most important man in my life, the one who's been there for me since the beginning. My hero, my protector, the best dad in the world." And then she turned. She turned toward Martin, lifted her glass and smiled. "To you, Dad." The room erupted in applause. People stood. Some even whistled. And all I could do was sit there, frozen, glass still in my hand. She went on for another minute or so, talking about childhood memories and inside jokes that only the two of them shared, half of which I knew were half-truths at best. She didn't even mention me until the very end, and even then, it was an afterthought. And of course, thank you to my stepdad, David, for helping out with so much. Helping out. That was the phrase. Like I'd loaned her a damn lawnmower. Like I hadn't spent the last 15 years of my life building a relationship she clearly never valued. I laughed, quietly, bitterly. The sound caught somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. I caught Dana's eyes across the room, wide, unsure, and I just shook my head. I didn't want her sympathy. I didn't want anyone's. I just wanted to disappear. People started coming up to Martin after that, slapping him on the back, telling him what a great job he'd done. One guy even leaned toward me and said, "Man, must be tough sharing the stage with Superdad." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I felt like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs. The music started back up, and the dance floor filled, but I stayed planted in my chair, suddenly aware of how ridiculous I must have looked. The invisible man in the corner. The guy who thought he mattered. I glanced toward the DJ booth where they were prepping the father-daughter dance, and that's when I knew I couldn't take it anymore. I left my drink on the table and walked outside. The night air hit me like a slap. Cold, sharp, real. I paced the gravel path behind the venue, hands stuffed in my pockets, heart pounding in my ears. How did I become so irrelevant? How did she erase me so cleanly, so effortlessly, in front of everyone? I wasn't asking for a medal. I wasn't expecting a tearful declaration of love. But damn it, I expected to matter. I thought I had earned that. And yet, in one sentence, she rewrote the narrative. She gave Martin a legacy he never built, and gave me a footnote I never deserved. Dana found me 20 minutes later, standing near the parking lot, staring at the blinking lights of the valet booth. "David," she said, her voice gentle. I didn't know she was going to say that. I didn't look at her. I just nodded, slowly. "Yeah, well," I muttered. She said what mattered most to her. Dana stepped closer. "She's young." She was trying to. "Please don't defend it." I snapped, the anger slipping through now. She made a choice. In front of 200 people, she chose who her father is. And it wasn't me. Dana looked like she wanted to cry, but I didn't care. I was done crying for someone who didn't see me. I turned away, stared out at the dark road, and said, "I'm leaving after dinner. I'll get a ride home. Just stay. Enjoy the night." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I returned to my table, smiled when necessary, avoided the dance floor. Riley never came over. Not once. She was too busy posing with Martin, laughing, twirling, being the perfect daughter for her perfect dad. I left before cake was served. No goodbyes. No fanfare. I just walked out, hailed a rideshare, and sat in the back seat in silence while the driver hummed along to a love song on the radio. My phone buzzed twice. Text from Dana asking if I was okay. I didn't answer. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, wondering how many other people have loved someone who never really loved them back. Not the way they thought. Not the way they needed. When I got home, I went straight to the garage. The itinerary for their honeymoon still sat on my workbench. I picked it up, stared at the logo of the luxury resort, the embossed names, Riley and Matt Thompson. And then I set it down again, very slowly. I knew what I was going to do. Not out of spite. Not out of vengeance. But clarity. I wasn't going to send them off to paradise on a lie. She didn't honor me. She didn't see me. And she damn sure didn't deserve the gift I'd planned. Not anymore. I didn't cancel the honeymoon right away. I waited until the morning after the wedding. The house was still quiet, still echoing with a strange emptiness that felt heavier than a hangover. Dana hadn't come home. She was staying with her sister for the night, probably to give Riley space to bask in her newlywed glow. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee I didn't finish, staring at the honeymoon confirmation email on my laptop. 10 nights in Bali. Private beachfront villa. Spa packages, candlelit dinners, snorkeling tours, and round-trip business-class flights. All non-refundable. But I didn't care. Not anymore. There are some debts you don't pay with money. Some wounds you don't soothe with "I'm sorry." I clicked open the chat with the travel agent, my fingers hovering for a second before I typed, "Please cancel the booking for Riley and Matthew Thompson. Confirmation number 492-7318. Effective immediately." It didn't take long. The agent replied politely, offered condolences, asked if there had been a death in the family or an emergency. I didn't respond. I just said, "Yes, go ahead. Cancel it." And then I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked into the garage, where I finally let myself feel everything. I didn't cry, not the way I expected. It wasn't a flood. It was more like a quiet crumbling, the way a building caves in after years of rot. Slow, controlled, still devastating. I ran my hand along the shelf where the honeymoon itinerary had sat for months, then clenched my fist so tight I could feel the tendons pull. She had made a public choice. Now so was I? Dana came home later that evening. I didn't mention the cancellation at first. I didn't feel like talking. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. "You're quiet," she said softly. I looked up from the couch and nodded. "I'm tired," I replied. She sat across from me, pulling off her heels. "The wedding was beautiful," she added, trying to be light. "Yeah," I said, not looking at her. "Beautiful." There was a long pause before she asked, "Did something happen?" I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just looked at her and said, "She erased me, Dana, in front of everyone. And you let it happen." That made her flinch. She opened her mouth to defend herself, then closed it. For once, she didn't have a script. The next day, Riley called. I let it go to voicemail. She left a chirpy message. "Hey, David. Just wanted to say thank you again for everything. We're heading out tomorrow morning. I'll send you pictures when we land. Love you." I stared at the phone for a long time after that. I didn't feel love. I felt insulted. She thought she could toast another man as the best dad in the world, then turn around and collect my gift like it meant nothing. I was done being a utility, a checkbook, a placeholder father when it suited her. So I didn't call back. I didn't text. I didn't explain. Let her find out the way I found out I didn't matter. Publicly, unexpectedly, without warning. Sure enough, the fallout came the next afternoon. It was around 3 p.m. when my phone rang again. Riley, this time frantic. I didn't pick up. Then came the texts. "David, what happened? The honeymoon is canceled? They said you called and canceled the entire thing. Are you serious right now? Please call me back." I sat on the back porch, phone in my lap, watching the clouds shift lazily across the sky. I could hear her panic through the punctuation. She was scrambling. Not because she understood what she'd done, but because she wasn't getting what she expected. That's what this was really about. Not love. Not remorse. Just loss of a favor. She didn't miss me. She missed the benefit of me. 30 minutes later, I heard a car pull up. Dana met her at the door before I could even stand. Voices rose, muffled, heated. Then the door swung open, and there she was, in my house, storming toward me with mascara already smudging under her eyes. "Why would you do that?" she demanded. "Why would you cancel our trip? What did we ever do to you?" I didn't flinch. I stood slowly, calmly, and said, "You honored the man you called your real father. Let him send you to Bali." She blinked, stunned, like she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. Like she thought I'd be too afraid to name the truth. Her lip quivered. "It was just a speech, David. I was trying to make him feel special. He's sensitive, okay?" I nodded slowly. "And I guess I'm disposable." "No," she cried. "God, no. I didn't mean it like that." She stepped closer. "You've always been there for me. You know that. That's why I thank you too." I let out a bitter laugh. "You thank me the way someone thanks the valet. Quick, polite, forgettable." She looked down. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I snapped. "And you did it while expecting me to fund your fantasy honeymoon." Dana tried to intervene. "Maybe we can fix this," but I cut her off. "No, there's no fixing this. I see it now. I was never her father. I was a background character in her story, and I'm done playing the part." Riley's face crumpled. She stepped forward again. "Please, David. We don't have the money to replace that trip. We've already packed. We leave in the morning." "Then you better start unpacking," I said flatly. "Because the man you toasted as the best dad in the world is going to have to come through. You chose him, Riley. Live with it." The silence after that was brutal. She stood there, stunned, breathing heavy, tears welling, but I didn't move. I didn't hug her. I didn't comfort her. I watched her realize, really realize, that actions have consequences. That love without respect is manipulation. She turned to Dana, pleading with her eyes, but Dana said nothing. She looked just as broken, caught between the daughter she bore and the man who never stopped showing up. Riley waited another second, then whispered, "I guess I was wrong about you." I shook my head. "No, I was wrong about you." Then I pointed to the door. "Please leave." And she did. She walked out of my house, her wedding dress still hanging in our guest closet upstairs, and left a trail of silence in her wake. I stood there for a long time after the door closed, unsure if I'd feel regret or relief. But what I felt was something else entirely. Clarity. For the first time in years, I saw the truth without fog. I wasn't her father. I was her fallback. And I was done being second choice. The days after Riley left my house were quiet in that strange, charged way you feel after a storm has rolled through and knocked down everything in its path. At first, I thought I might feel guilt or even shame, like maybe I had gone too far. But instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not joy, not satisfaction, just peace. The kind that comes when the noise finally dies down and you're left with the raw truth. It was done. There was no repairing what happened, no smoothing it over with a card or an awkward lunch or a "hey, can we talk?" She had made her choice. I had made mine. The line had been drawn, and for once in my life, I wasn't the one stepping over it just to keep the peace. But that peace didn't come without consequences. Word spread fast, faster than I expected. One of Riley's bridesmaids posted something vague on Instagram the day after their would-be honeymoon was supposed to start. It read, "Imagine your entire trip gets canceled because someone couldn't take a little truth." A few hours later, another one chimed in with a comment about spiteful energy from people who pretend to be father figures. I didn't respond. I didn't even screenshot it. I just stared at the screen and felt the familiar burn of being misrepresented. That was always the risk, wasn't it? That someone else gets to write your story while you're too tired to correct the record. And I was tired. Exhausted, actually. Not from defending myself, but from the years of being someone's silent support while another man got the public credit. Then came the calls. Riley's aunt, Dana's sister, called to check in, but ended up lecturing me for half an hour about forgiveness. She used words like misunderstood, emotional day, and bad timing. She said I was too harsh, that a toast shouldn't ruin a relationship. I let her speak. I let her spill all of her moral superiority into my ear like it was gospel. And when she finally asked if I had anything to say, I said, "If someone made a toast at your funeral and forgot to mention your name, would you feel honored or erased?" That shut her up. She hung up without saying goodbye. Dana, for her part, didn't try to change my mind, not directly. But I could feel her slipping into a kind of quiet panic. She cooked more. She hovered. She sat beside me on the couch like a cat waiting to be noticed. One night, she finally asked, "Are you really never going to talk to her again?" I didn't answer right away. I was watching a documentary about some forgotten war, something to drown out the noise in my head. I muted the TV and looked at her. "Would you?" I asked. "If someone publicly replaced you and then came crawling back only after their free vacation disappeared, would you let them back in?" She blinked fast, trying not to cry. "She's our daughter." "No," I said quietly, "she's your daughter." She made that clear. Dana didn't speak after that. She stood up and left the room, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't follow her. I stayed on the couch and watched tanks roll across a screen instead of dealing with my wife's heartbreak. The house grew colder over the next few weeks. Not in temperature, but in mood. Meals were quiet. Conversations were surface level. She started sleeping in the guest room because I snored, but we both knew it wasn't about that. I started to wonder if our marriage would survive this fracture. It wasn't just Riley I had cut off. It was a part of Dana, too. A mother's loyalty runs deep, even when her daughter is wrong. Especially when her daughter is wrong. But I couldn't keep betraying myself to make everyone else comfortable. I had done that for too many years. I had smiled through too many hollow holidays, written too many checks I couldn't afford, swallowed too many small slights in the name of family. What I did wasn't revenge. It was refusal. Refusal to play the fool one more time. A few weeks later, my brother came over for a beer. He wasn't close with Riley. Never had been. But he knew enough to piece together what happened from Dana and a few cousins. He listened as I laid it all out. Every detail from the toast to the cancellation to the confrontation in my living room. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "Damn," he said. "That's brutal." I nodded. "You think I went too far?" He shook his head. "No. I think you finally stopped pretending." That stuck with me. I'd spent so many years performing a role, father figure, backup parent, quiet sponsor, and never realized how invisible I'd become until I stopped playing. Only then did people notice. And only because I stopped giving. Riley tried once more, just once. A handwritten letter. It arrived in a pale blue envelope with no return address. Her handwriting hadn't changed since high school. Loopy, neat, too perfect to be real. Inside, she said she was sorry, that she was overwhelmed, that the speech was poorly worded, that she never meant to hurt me. But even in her apology, she included a line that made my blood run cold. I thought you'd understand that I had to make my dad feel special. My dad. Not one of my dads. Not both of you. Just him. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into a drawer I didn't open again for months. After that, I stopped referring to her as my daughter. Not out of spite. Just clarity. If someone tells you who they are, believe them. And if someone tells you what you are to them, believe that too. When people asked about the wedding, I told them it was nice. When they asked about the couple, I said I hadn't spoken to them in a while. Eventually, they stopped asking. That's the thing about setting boundaries. People either respect them or they quietly disappear. And I was fine with either. It had been 4 months since the wedding when I realized I hadn't thought about Riley in over a week. That surprised me. Not because I missed her. By then, the ache had faded. But because I'd spent so long orbiting around her emotional gravity that the silence felt unfamiliar. I was sitting in the backyard, an early spring breeze teasing the trees, drinking my morning coffee alone. I used to imagine moments like this, retirement-age fantasies where Riley would bring the grandkids over on Sunday mornings, and Dana and I would argue playfully about whose turn it was to host brunch. But fantasies have a cruel way of overstaying their welcome. Even after the reality becomes painfully clear, your mind keeps playing reruns of a version of life that never existed. It took time, but I finally turned the channel off. The distance between Dana and me hadn't vanished, but it had shifted into something more manageable. We weren't sleeping in separate rooms anymore, though the intimacy still felt cautious, like a ceasefire rather than a reunion. We moved around the house like people who shared a history but not necessarily a future, civil, polite, restrained. Occasionally, she'd bring up Riley's name in passing, always with a careful tone, like someone testing the temperature of bathwater before stepping in. And I'd let her. I didn't flinch anymore. But I never engaged beyond polite nods or vague responses. Because as much as I loved Dana, I wasn't going to contort myself into a shape that made her feel more comfortable at my expense. I had done that for 15 years. I was done now. Friends began to ask fewer questions, which helped. At first, they all wanted the gossip. What really happened? Why would she say that in her speech? Did you really cancel the honeymoon? But people lose interest quickly when you don't feed them drama. When I gave them nothing but calm explanations and quiet conviction, they moved on. The only person who didn't ask for details was my brother, and maybe that's why he was the only one I kept around. Sometimes we'd sit in my garage, sipping beer in silence, and he'd say something simple like, "You did the right thing," and leave it at that. That's the kind of loyalty I'd been missing from Riley. Uncomplicated, unearned, but deeply felt. What I didn't expect, however, was how much I'd start to enjoy the quiet. For years, my life revolved around planning things for Riley, checking on her, paying for this or that, being available at all hours. And when that stopped, I expected to feel hollow. But instead, I felt whole. For the first time in a long time, I could spend money on things that brought me joy. I upgraded my old truck. Took a solo weekend trip to Oregon just because I'd always wanted to see the coast. I even signed up for a woodworking class, something I used to dream about but never found time for. It wasn't that I was suddenly free. It was that I was finally living for someone who didn't treat my love like a vending machine. About 6 months after the wedding, I ran into Matt, Riley's husband, at the grocery store. He looked rough, thin, pale, bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in weeks. He gave me a tight nod, and I returned it, but didn't slow down. I didn't know him anything, and I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. But to my surprise, he followed me into the coffee aisle. "David," he said quietly. I turned, arms crossed. "Yeah." He hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. I just wanted to say, I didn't know she was going to say all that. At the wedding. I knew she wanted to say something about her dad, but I didn't know it would be like that. I looked at him for a long time. "Okay." He blinked. "That's it." I shrugged. You didn't stop her. You didn't say anything when I was sitting there like a ghost. You clapped with everyone else." His shoulders sank. "She told me it was just for show, that it didn't mean anything." I nodded slowly. It meant something to me. He nodded too, eyes low. I figured. He looked like he wanted to say more, but I turned and walked away. Not because I was angry, but because I was done. Done explaining, done educating, done trying to make people see what they were never willing to see in the first place. He wasn't my responsibility. Neither was she. Not anymore. Later that night, I told Dana about the encounter. She listened quietly, then asked, "Do you ever think you'll forgive her?" I thought about it, really thought. And then I said, "I think forgiveness is a door I don't need to walk through. I'm fine just standing outside of it." Dana didn't push. Maybe she finally understood. Or maybe she was just too tired to argue. Either way, it didn't matter. My peace didn't require anyone else's approval. A few weeks later, I got another letter from Riley. This one was shorter, less dramatic. It said she was pregnant, that she hoped I'd be part of the baby's life, that she wanted to start fresh. I read it twice, then set it down on the table and stared at it for a long time. She wasn't sorry. Not really. She just wanted something from me again. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for saying no. I didn't respond. I didn't reach out. Because my absence wasn't punishment. It was protection. For me. I sat out back again the next morning. Same chair, same coffee, same breeze. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly okay. Not because everything had healed. Not because I'd been vindicated. But because I had finally chosen myself. I gave that girl everything I had. My time, my money, my love. And she chose to honor the man who showed up when it was convenient. I chose to walk away when it hurt the most. And I would do it again. Some people will call me heartless. Others will say I was justified. But when someone shows you exactly where you stand in their life, and then asks you for more, it's okay to say no. Not out of hate, but out of clarity. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they refused to see your worth, tell me below, what finally pushed you over the edge? And if this story hit home, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories about family, betrayal, and the hard choices that define us. See you soon in the next one.